welcome to the deep dive. Gee, so we're jumping into that stack of sources you sent over.
Yeah, quite a few articles.
All published around June 12th, 2025, mostly via CoinMarketCap links. And our mission today is pretty straightforward.
Just pull out the key insights.
Exactly. Take these pieces, they cover, market stuff, corporate moves, specific projects, and just try to make sense of the landscape right now.
Based only on what's in these articles.
Precisely. Think of it as us unpacking this together for you, helping you see what these specific sources are highlighting.
Sounds good. What's interesting is the mix. Like you said, you've got the long view, the really immediate data, and then the project level stuff.
Yeah, it's a good cross-section. It shows the different, forces at play, according to these particular reports anyway.
Okay.
So let's start with that bigger picture, the macro view maybe. And this whole idea of institutional interest keeps coming up.
Right.
We have that source, the guest post from the Crypto Times, looks back at Michael Saylor, MicroStrategy, making that huge Bitcoin pivot.
A key moment for sure.
But crucially, this article ties that specific move back in 2020 directly to the economic turmoil that was happening then.
Okay, so it wasn't just out of the blue. The source frames it as a response.
Exactly. A direct response to instability in traditional finance, as the source puts it.
That context is useful. It gives a specific why for corporate adoption, at least in that case, coming out of a traditional finance crisis point.
Which makes this next piece, also in USAT, pretty interesting. It's from coindu.com. And it quotes the chief investment officer at Bitwise, who apparently says corporate interest in Bitcoin is, quote, just beginning.
Just beginning. That's a pretty strong statement from a CIO. Suggests the conversation isn't fading, maybe even accelerating, at least in some circles.
And the reason the Coindu source cites for this, this potential growth, is fascinating. It says it's because traditional cash management strategies are, losing their effectiveness.
Okay, so connect that back to Saylor. The idea presented in these sources is that the original driver's instability, maybe poor returns or effectiveness of traditional cash reserves, those things might still be here.
Or getting worse.
Or getting worse, potentially. And that's pushing more companies to at least look at Bitcoin. The Bitwise CIO, quote, well, it underscores that. It suggests a fundamental need is driving broader attention.
Okay, so that's the sort of longer-term institutional narrative from these sources.
Yeah.
Let's pivot now. Let's look at the immediate market signals, current conditions.
Day stuff.
Yeah, and there's a really interesting signal in that it's Bitcoin World Source. It talks about Glassnode data.
On-chain data. Looking at the blockchain itself.
Exactly. And according to this source, Glassnode is seeing key signals that suggest a potential explosive surge could be coming for Bitcoin's price.
Explosive surge. Okay.
Yeah.
Based on underlying network activity.
Yeah, the source implies it's based on patterns, network health, things like that, which have historically been, bullish signs.
So that piece suggests the fundamentals, the on-chain picture, look pretty strong for the future, potentially.
And here's the tension, right?
Yeah.
The immediate reality, reported in another source you sent, looks different.
Okay.
There's a Coinpedia news article. It looks at the market today, June 12th, 2025, and it's reporting a broad crypto market downturn.
So a clear contrast, a forward-looking signal versus today's price action.
Right, and Coinpedia gives reasons, numbers. It says the downturn is linked to slides in traditional markets.
Which ones?
Specifically mentions DJT, maybe the Dow Jones Transport Average.
Yeah.
The S&P 500 and the NASDAQ says slides there triggered panic in crypto.
Interesting they use the word panic. It shows that linkage, right, between TradFi sentiment and crypto.
Definitely, and the numbers are precise. Total market cap down 1.68% today, hitting $3.39 trillion. Daily trading volume also dipped 5.27% to $133.81 billion.
So putting these two sources together, it's Bitcoin World and Coinpedia. The insight seems to be this. You can have underlying, maybe longer-term positive signals on-chain.
Like the Glassnode data suggests.
Right. But the short-term market, as Coinpedia reports for today, is still really sensitive to traditional market moves. Volatility there can ripple through crypto immediately.
Yeah, it definitely highlights that connection.
Yeah.
NASDAQ jitters hit Bitcoin.
Exactly. It shows you're navigating signals on different timelines. Short-term noise versus potential long-term trends. It's complex.
It really is. Feels like the market's being pulled. Internal strength versus external fear, maybe?
That's one way to frame it based on these reports.
Okay, let's shift again. Let's look beyond Bitcoin now. Altcoins, the broader crypto market.
Right.
You included another coindu.com piece. This one asked that classic question. Is altcoin season 2025 just around the corner?
Ah, yes, the perennial question.
hmm
Everyone wants to know when the alts will run.
And this source explains one way people try to track it, the altcoin season index.
Right. It looks at how many alts are outperforming Bitcoin, usually over 90 days or so.
That's the one. And according to this source, key indicators within that index are suggesting a potential breakout for altcoin season 2025.
So purely from that index's perspective, the conditions might be getting favorable for alts relative to Bitcoin, a potential shift in momentum.
And then we have some other sources that give us a more ground level view, specific examples of activity in the altcoin space.
Kind of illustrating why an alt season might happen, perhaps, project by project.
Maybe. There's a CoinQ source mentioning a project called BlockDAG.
Okay.
It highlights some pretty big reported numbers for them. It says BlockDAG raised $298 million.
Wow, okay. That's a significant raise.
Yeah. And it notes their current pricing is 0.0008 UTAN and mentions a reported ROI of 2,678%.
Huge ROI numbers being reported there.
The source brings these up and also mentions XLM and AVX price action, seemingly just for comparison within the altcoin market.
That fundraising number, the $298 million for BlockDAG, that's the standout detail for me from that source.
Why is that?
Well, it suggests that even with all the market uncertainty we just talked about, the downturns, the links to TradFi, there's still serious capital flowing into specific projects.
So investor confidence isn't gone, just maybe more selective.
Exactly. At least according to this report on BlockDAG, it suggests money is finding specific bets it likes within the altcoin space.
Okay, then there's another one, a BTC Wire source about Hello Labs.
Right.
This one details token economy upgrades they're apparently making. It mentions introducing a burn and earn model,
which usually aims to reduce supply, make it deflationary, while maybe rewarding holders.
Yeah, the source frames it as creating a deflationary structure. And they're also launching a multi-chain bridge. The goal cited is strengthening the utility of their Hello token.
Okay, so these examples, BlockDAG's reported fundraising, Hello Labs token changes, they add another layer, don't they?
How so?
They complement that altcoin season index idea. The BlockDAG report shows investment is happening at scale in certain projects.
Right.
And the Hello Labs source shows projects are actively working on their fundamentals. Things like token utility, supply mechanics, the burn model, aiming for deflation and interoperability with multi-chain bridges.
So building value from the ground up.
Trying to, yes. Regardless of the market mood swings, these kinds of project-level developments, well, they're the engines, right? They could potentially fuel growth in the altcoin sector, which might eventually show up in something like that altcoin season index the other source mentioned.
Okay, let's try and pull these threads together then. From all the sources you shared today.
Let's recap.
We looked back, using that Crypto Times piece, at the historical reasons cited for corporate Bitcoin adoption, linking it to past economic turmoil. Then we saw the Bitwise CIO quote in CoinDo, suggesting that institutional interest, driven by issues in traditional finance, might still be in its early days.
Right, the just beginning idea.
Then we hit that conflict, Glassnode data via its Bitcoin world, hinting at a potential Bitcoin surge.
Based on on-chain fundamentals.
Clashing with the Coinpedia report of today's actual market downturn, which they link to problems in traditional stock markets.
Highlighting that short-term external influence.
And finally, we dove into altcoins. Saw the CoinDo piece on the altcoin season index, suggesting potential.
A potential breakout, according to that index.
And then grounded that with specific examples like the reported BlockDAG fundraising from CoinQ and the Hello Labs token upgrades from BTC Wire, showing activity on the project level.
Yeah, I think we've extracted the core findings from each layer presented in these articles. The history, the institutional view, those conflicting signals, and the altcoin activity.
Right. So we hope this deep dive helps you process this specific snapshot, this collection of reports about what's happening, or at least what's being said about crypto right now.
And maybe a final thought for you to chew on, sort of weaving these themes together.
Go for it.
Given these conflicting signals we've unpacked from the sources about, reports of growing long-term corporate interest and these potential fundamental surge indicators on one side, and then the immediate reality of market dips strongly influenced by traditional finance jitters on the other side. How do you personally weigh those different forces? How do you navigate that tension when you're trying to form your own perspective on where the crypto market might be heading?